Peak Horizon. It is now 7 o'clock, and I call the regular session of Findlay City Council on September 15, 2020. We will start with the roll.
Mr. Greeno?
Here.
Mr. Haas?
Here.
Mr. Hellman?
Here.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Here.
Mr. Palmer?
Here.
Mr. Russell?
Here.
Mr. Schindeldecker?
Here.
Mr. Slough?
Here.
Ms. Warnicki? And Mr. Wolfser?
Present.
Ms. Warnicki informed me a couple weeks ago that she would not be here this evening. Mr. Russell.
Move to excuse.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of excusing Ms. Warnicki this evening, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. She is excused. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We will entertain a motion to accept the council minutes. Mr. Slough.
I would move to approve the minutes as circulated.
Second, Mr. Wolfser. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of accepting the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And the minutes are accepted. Mr. Russell, do we have any add-ons, replacements, or removal from tonight's agenda?
Yes, sir. We have one add-on and two replacements. Add-on, a financial summary from the mayor. The replacement for Exhibit A on Resolution 027-2020 and for Ordinance 2020-103 as amended, we have another amendment. So I would move that we add on, amend, and amend.
Second, Mr. Schindeldecker. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the replacement and add-on, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And it's changed. We have no proclamations, no recognitions, or retirement resolutions. We do have one oral communication. At this time, I'd invite Mark Wright up to the podium. Mr. Wright, please speak into the microphone, and you have 4 minutes. He'd like to speak to the water meter replacement.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Mark Wright from Badger Meter. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all tonight. I'm speaking on Ordinance 2020-092. It's my understanding that the council will be voting on this ordinance tonight for the water meter system replacement. Before that vote takes place, I would like to clarify why Badger Meter was unable to respond to your bid back in 2018. And also clean up some misinformation surrounding our cellular product. Due to the restrictive specs, the proposal was for a collector-based solution. Cellular was ruled out due to poor encryption and non-licensed frequency. The reason this is so significant is what you are voting on tonight is a RF product that sends a signal from the home to the collector. That collector takes every single read and goes over the cellular network. So something that was written out of the spec is actually how you will retrieve your reads. So it goes to the data collector, and the data collector calls in. Our Orion cellular product from Badger Meter is an LTE-M product. It uses advanced encryption standard, or AES 256. It's non-proprietary. It is 5G ready, two-way cellular, and it is a licensed network. This network is private and serves only machine to machine. It never touches the public network. Our products are ISO 27001 compliant and SOC 2 compliant as well. Badger Meter is an industry leader when it comes to secure data. Our cellular product is capable of connecting to 12 encoder types from numerous meter manufacturers. This makes it a universal product, allowing utilities like Findlay to have the freedom to choose your supplier, or makes it meter agnostic. In the past, our company has presented solutions that would have greatly benefited the city, not only on cost, but on the customer side as well with leak notifications. We can offer a single software solution that takes your investment back from 2009 and incorporates it today with our cellular network. And by that, we are not adding a single piece of infrastructure throughout your city. I understand this process has taken a long time to resolve. We at Badger just want an opportunity to compete for your business. I feel it's the best solution in the AMI market. It does not involve, like I said, adding unnecessary infrastructure throughout the city. If we're given this opportunity, we can have an official proposal within 3 weeks for your review. Thank you for your time. Can I answer any questions or concerns?
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Mr. Helmut.
You said that you were prohibited from presenting your proposal.
That's correct.
Can you review that again? Why was that?
In the specification,
Yes.
it ruled out that a cellular would not be entertained, a cellular transmitter. In all fairness, back in 2018, that was a different product too. So over the evolution of our product, it is now an LTE-M, meaning machine-to-machine product. So things change rapidly in technology, especially from 2018.
And what other cities do you have this technology deployed in?
We're approximately in 1,000 utilities throughout the U.S. The closest one that's fully,
Any Ohio?
yeah, Avon.
Is that in Cleveland?
In Sheffield, or I'm sorry, North Ridgeville is actually in your same position, where they have a Galaxy system, and all they're doing is upgrading the software. And then as a Galaxy transmitter fails, we will be replacing it with a cellular unit.
And have you ever run into this
Make sure your
situation?
microphone's on.
Sorry. Have you ever run into this situation before? When it comes
Yes.
to bidding?
Yes. Yes, I have.
Mr. Wilson.
Mark, so what you're saying is that this product didn't exist in 2018?
Yes, it did.
It did.
It did exist, but it has evolved.
So it's evolved such that it meets the specs now, but it didn't in 2018?
It didn't, but it was possibly interpreted a little different in 18. So the interpretation might have been that it wasn't encrypted, or it wasn't on the LTE-M network, which is a machine-to-machine network. It might have been the LTE transmitter, which was hitting the public network. But it was always licensed and it was always encrypted. But
Mr. Russell.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. He had a question and it must have been answered. Any other, Ms. Mayor, do you have a question or comment?
I just have a quick question for Mr. Wright, if I may. When you guys read the specs and determined that your products were not going to meet the specs, did you request if we would consider your product regardless of it meeting the initial RFQ standards?
No, we actually submitted that we couldn't be responsive to your specs, but previous to that bid that we were unaware of, we were actually in the middle of negotiating with the city of Findlay, and then within a day, all of a sudden we're finding out an RFQ is coming out with no indication or warning that we were not going to negotiate. Prior to this, Badger Meter had made several offers to the city of Findlay to try to rectify some of the issues we were having in the field, and those meetings went cold for a long time. And then all of a sudden, an RFQ was out, so we kind of understood where your position or the city's position was.
So I guess I would just say to council that obviously this is a complex topic. I know that I've communicated with Chairman Greeno for water and sewer and have provided some dates that I think he'll be proposing for a committee of the whole meeting later this evening, where we'll be able to present additional information. I know we forwarded a lot of content to you guys over the last couple of weeks on this entire process, so it's I would request that this legislation remain tabled until we can go over that in more detail. And I think it will become evident why we created the specs the way we did and why we did not specifically work directly with Badger to consider their product.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Thank you.
Okay, we have petitions.
The zoning amendment for 786th Street to change the zoning from R1 large lot residential to R4 duplex triplex.
This will be referred to city planning and planning and zoning committee. Written communications.
Economic Development Advisory Board minutes of September 3rd, 2020.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed. Reports of municipal officers and departments.
A letter from City Auditor Jim Stashak regarding employee Roth IRA 457 options availability. He requested his letter be read.
Mr. Wilson.
Make motion to have the letter read.
Second, Mr. Palmer. All those in favor of having the letter read, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Please read the letter. Thank you.
The city participates in 2 deferred compensation programs for the benefit of the employees: the Ohio Association of Professional Firefighters 457 Deferred Compensation Plan and the Ohio Public Employees Deferred Compensation Program. Both of these programs have now developed opportunities allowing public employees to invest in Roth IRAs through the payroll deductions. We are asking council to enable the Roth IRA 457 option to be activated through both programs as of the beginning of 2021. This would allow employees to invest in the option as the first payday in January 2021. I have asked the Director of Law to place the required legislation on your agenda for the September 15th meeting. This legislation will require 3 readings.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Findlay Police Departmental Activities Report for August 2020.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Letter from Mayor Mern regarding annual bids and contracts.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
City Income Tax Monthly Collections Report for August 2020.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Findlay Fire Departmental Activities Report for August 2020.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Findlay Municipal Court Activities Report for August 2020.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Summary Financial Reports as of August 31st, 2020.
Questions or comments? Mr. Station.
Thank you. Very quickly, I'd like to move your attention to the snapshot document. I've added a couple of lines there. There's been a lot of questions about obligations for potential retirements. So if you look in the center section, Severance Payout Reserve Fund 2090, we started with a projected balance of $980,545, just shy of $1 million, which is wonderful. We're going to be asking for an appropriation that's necessary of $325,000 to pay out retirement costs that have been incurred. And in calculating your total liability for retirements that could occur yet this year, we don't anticipate this happening this year, but I want to make sure you're aware of this. An additional $1.2 million. So your obligation as of December 31st, 2020 will be about $600,000 more than the $1 million you started with this year. And that's a significant number, and it will grow as we roll into next year's budget year. So I thought you would want to be aware of that in light of what's happening and as we move towards the budget season. Thank you.
Questions? Mr. Russell.
Jim, are you able to project those potential retirement costs out 2 years, 5 years, similar to the way you suggest that the operating budget is done? Or is it just too, for lack of a better term, random?
I am comfortable going out that second year and looking at that, and I've done a preliminary number on that as well. Without being too detailed and lengthening the meeting, yes, I can do that. The nice thing is the second year doesn't add the significance that the first year does, because the first year has the carry forward from prior years. So it's probably $300,000 to $400,000, give or take. Could be
Okay.
less.
Thank you.
Any other question, Mr. Wilson?
Jim, and the numbers that you've reported here, these are known retirements? This isn't a real rational guess?
These are known folks who are eligible per our books to retire. So if there are individuals with military service or transferable service or in other situations, those would be unknowns on top of this number.
Okay, so if we're using known people that are eligible to retire, could we not do what Councilman Russell suggested, was project that forward 5 years, then people get older, right, and then all of a sudden they're eligible to retire?
No, but I guess my point was there's more randomness as you go out, because the way you change, people change jobs and whatnot, so you certainly could project it out.
Okay.
For budgetary purposes, if you were doing a full 5-year operations budget, I think we would want to know that burden on the path, but again, like anything else, it would be a moving target.
Sure.
So we would have the ability to do it based on your employees today. So
Right.
Yeah, I didn't mean to mislead you if I implied that we couldn't do it, but we do 2 years, so.
Yeah, I know we do 2 years. I guess my interest is that I know that we're starting up, we're gonna peak at some point, right? We're going up, this is an increasing number every year so far. At some point, we're gonna peak out, we should be going back down the other way as our workforce gets younger.
Well, a lot of it would have impact from the changes in deferred comp. Deferred comp went from one system to an ABC tier, 3 tiers. And for people in the A system, a lot of those were able to retire at any time. The B system, if you ended up in B, you picked up years. There are people we have who are going to have to work an extra 3, 4, or 5 years. So I haven't done a peak analysis, but that rolls into this significant, like people who would have, most employees have their retirement date on the bulletin board next to their desk. And so they've got a good idea when they're leaving.
Mr. Russell?
Based on those tiers ABC, is that a known number that we have X percentage of employees in the A pool, or a specific number of employees in the A pool, and the B and the C?
We have a wonderful person in our payroll clerk, Carolyn Chase, who really has a wonderful handle on that. And I can't say that we would know it to the dollar, but I think we could get pretty close based on an existing population, if that number was important to this councilman. We wanted to see it as part of the budget cycle. And if not, she's going to chew me out tomorrow.
Obviously, my concerns are on exposure to the city, and to ensure that we are sufficiently funded to meet the requirements, meet the demands or meet the obligations that we've made to these employees as part of their employment contract, and that's extremely important. And you hear about the disasters in the making in Illinois and California when it comes to their pensions, their obligations, and all that. I'd like to get an understanding of where the city of Findlay is in that, and so that's what's behind the questions, and maybe this is an appropriate conversation for a different time with more time to prepare.
I'd like the idea of seeing if I can help you during the budget meetings. I will see what we can do for that, and then you guys will have as much information as I can give you to make a decision if you want to move forward from there or do more for there.
I agree. I'm sorry, Mr. President, but I would agree, Jim, the budget would be a good time for us to take a look at this a little bit closer. And I think that agrees with where Councilman Russell is going with this. I have the exact same situation. I want to see where we're at, what our liability looks like over a period of time, understanding that it's a good guess. just to make sure, because, I mean, had we not, we just pushed this to 1 million, what, a year ago?
Yeah.
About this time a year ago. And so had we not done that, these numbers have been significantly different. So I'm glad we did that.
I want to thank you both for the questions. They're important questions.
Thanks, Chief.
Okay. Any other questions? Hearing none, report to be filed.
City Planning Commission agenda for October 8th, 2020, as well as the minutes of August 13th, 2020.
Questions or comments? Agenda and minutes to be filed.
Treasurer's reconciliation report for August 31st, 2020.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Board of Zoning Appeals minutes for July 9th, 2020.
Questions or comments? Minutes to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Brian Thomas regarding 6th capital improvement appropriation.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from City Auditor Jim Stashak regarding Federal CARES Act funding. He requests that his letter be read.
Mr. Hellman?
I would request, concur with that, ask that the letter be read into the record.
Second, Mr. Wobser. All those in favor of reading this into the record say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Letter will be read.
The Ohio Controlling Board has distributed Federal CARES Act funding to the counties, townships, villages, and municipalities. This funding is referred to as the Coronavirus Relief Fund. The distribution formula is based upon the local government funding allocation, and the CRF was distributed to the respective county auditors the week of September 1st. We have been notified by the county a second amount is being deposited into our account. I am awaiting a ruling from the State of Ohio OBM regarding the mayor's desired allocation of remaining funds for reimbursement of fire department wages. However, a COVID-19 FAQ document issued by the Auditor of State seems to make doing this difficult at best, and the Federal Treasurer's Office of Inspector General and the U.S. Department of Treasury have issued conflicting FAQs as well. We must wait on an approval from the Direct Oversight Authority, the Ohio OBM. By copy of this letter, the law director is requested to prepare an ordinance to appropriate as follows. From Coronavirus Release Fund, State Controlling Board, $278,748.40 to Coronavirus Relief CRF, number 220990000-other, $278,748.40. Although there is a pending legislation at the state, currently the first window of encumbrance is greatly compressed by state law, October 15, 2020. It is respectfully requested that council suspend the statutory requirements and give this legislation all 3 of its readings at the meeting on September 15, 2020, and adopt the legislation as emergency. Additionally, an appropriations committee meeting would again be of some value for the deputy auditor and me to update the committee on many ways the funds are being utilized locally, and also to discuss the pending 3rd round of funding.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Brian Thomas regarding Ohio Public Works Commission grant application, State and Markle Street reconstruction, number 328-03300.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed. Yeah, I just will add to the agenda that the financial summary of the mayor, and put that on there if anybody has any questions or comments about that, or did you want to do that at a
I can
later?
address that here.
Okay,
Unless there's questions.
we'll do that under new business. Committee reports.
Planning and Zoning Committee, to whom was referred a request from SRC Group LLC on behalf of Mark Snyder to rezone 525 and 529 Davis Street from R2 single family low density to M2 multiple family district high density. We recommend approval as requested.
Entertain, Mr. Russell.
Move for adoption of the committee or acceptance of the committee report.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Any discussion? All those in favor of adopting the committee report say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Committee report is adopted.
Planning and Zoning Committee, to whom was referred a request from Donald G. Croy to vacate the east-west alley between Broad Avenue and the alley east between lots 12178 and 12179 in the Riverview addition. We recommend approval as requested.
Mr. Russell.
Move for acceptance of the committee report.
Second, Mr. Slough. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of the committee report say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Committee report is adopted. Legislation.
Second reading for Resolution 25, 2020. A resolution stating what services the City of Findlay, Ohio will provide to the territory proposed to be annexed to the City of Findlay, Ohio, situated in Marion Township, County of Hancock, State of Ohio, and being a part of Section 6 South, Township 1 North, Range 11 East, a tract of land consisting of 8.584 acres of land, more or less. First reading for Resolution 27, 2020. A resolution approving the expenditures made by the Auditor's Office on the attached list of vouchers which either exceeded purchase order or were incurred without a purchase order, exceeding the statutory limit of $3,000, all in accordance with Ohio Revised Code 5705.41D.
Mr. Russell.
Move for adoption of resolution 027-2020.
Second, Mr. Slough. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of resolution number 027-2020, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Haas.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Shingeldecker.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
And Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
The resolution is adopted. Ordinances.
Third reading for ordinance 2020-96, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Slough.
I move for adoption of ordinance 2020-096.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of ordinance 2020-096, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Haas.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Shingeldecker.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
And Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Third reading for ordinance 2020-98, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Slough.
I would move for adoption of ordinance 2020-098.
Second, Mr. Wobser. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of ordinance 2020-098, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Shingeldecker.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Haas.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Third reading for ordinance 2020-99, an ordinance authorizing the service director and/or city engineer of the City of Findlay, Ohio, to advertise for bids and enter into an agreement or agreements for the Martin Luther King Parkway Improvements, project number 328-03100, as well as the Ohio Department of Transportation fiscal year 21 resurfacing project number 328-01400, appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Greeno.
I move for adoption of ordinance number 2020-099.
Second, Mr. Hellman. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of ordinance 2020-099, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Shingeldecker.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Haas.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Third reading for ordinance 2020-102, an ordinance amending chapter 1100 et sec of the codified ordinances of the City of Findlay, Ohio, known as the zoning code, by rezoning the following described property, referred to as 1028 and 1030 Hurd Avenue rezone, which previously was zoned R1 single family low density to R2 medium density.
Mr. Hellman.
I move for approval of ordinance 2020-102.
Second, Mr. Shindeldecker. Discussion. Mr. Russell.
Just want to once again make note that this is a type of ordinance that if we would have done the rezoning that is currently being proposed, this ordinance would not be in front of council, and these citizens would not have had to gone through this process and paid money to have the property rezoned. They would already be R2, and we wouldn't be discussing this specific issue. So this is one of the reasons why the rezoning effort that is currently underway is being done.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of ordinance 2020-102, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Schindledecker?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Haas?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer? Oh, we're done, Mr. Palmer.
The ordinance is adopted.
Go Chicago.
Third reading for ordinance 2020-103 as amended. An ordinance vacating a certain portion of a certain right-of-way hereinafter referred to as Lake Cascades Parkway Vacation in the city of Findlay, Ohio.
Mr. Hellman.
I have a question, if I might. Is this the second amendment that we're looking at, or is this merely?
Second amendment.
It was amended prior, the second amendment was added this evening.
Can somebody point out to me what that entails?
The legal description.
It was, yeah, it was legal description
For the county auditors.
per the county auditor's office. Please turn on your microphone when you speak. Thank you.
Can you hear me now? All right, thank you.
Any
Thank you.
other questions? Mr. Russell.
Move for adoption of ordinance 2020-103 as amended.
Second, Mr. Palmer. I'm sorry, now, are there any additional questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of ordinance 2020-103 as amended, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Schindledecker?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Haas?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
And Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2020-106, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and auditor of the city of Findlay, Ohio to execute all documents necessary to make the benefits of the Ohio Association of Professional Firefighters 457 Deferred Compensation Plan, Roth 457 option, should be available to all Findlay firefighters and declared an emergency.
Mr. Palmer.
Oh, never mind.
First reading for ordinance 2020-107, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and auditor of the city of Findlay, Ohio to execute all documents necessary to make the benefits of the Ohio Public Employees Deferred Compensation Program, Roth 457 option available to all city of Findlay employees and declare an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2020-108, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and/or acting service director of the city of Findlay, Ohio to advertise for bids and enter into contracts with option years for the purchase of the materials, chemicals, and service agreements needed by the various departments of the city of Findlay, Ohio, commencing January 1, 2021, and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2020-109, an ordinance authorizing the auditor to make payroll deductions for those employees who have elected to enroll in the health savings account plan and declared an emergency.
Mr. Russell.
Question for Jim. So you're just setting the rates for the HSAs for next year, correct?
Yeah, we got 3 readings. So
Okay, thank you.
First reading for ordinance 2020-110, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell.
Move that council's statutory rules be suspended and ordinance 2020-110 be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Greeno. All those in favor of suspending the rules of council say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Schindledecker?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Haas.
Aye.
Mr. Homan.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
and Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Rules of council are suspended, and the clerk will give this a second and third reading.
Ordinance 2020-110, ordinance 2020-110.
Mr. Wilson.
Make a motion to approve ordinance 2020-110.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Any discussion? Mr. Hellman.
I have a quick question as to why it was necessary to suspend the rules on this and expedite its passage. If somebody could answer that. Jim or Craig?
Well, I moved to suspend it because the auditor requested it, and based on the timeline, in order to do what we need to do with his funds, it needed to be done tonight because there was an early October deadline, and that was written out in the letter from the auditor.
Mr. Wilson.
Mayor, Auditor, we come to a reasonable solution on where we stand on this. This was, everybody from council, I'm sure you guys remember the conversations that we've had, and a little bit not a disagreement, just a difference of opinion on what these monies could be spent on.
So as the auditor's letter states, the guidance that we've received from Treasury as recently as last week clearly states, yes, in my opinion, clearly states it can be used for safety service payroll. I believe I sent that document out. If not, I apologize. We have not received a direct response from OBM. I would expect that they will update their FAQs in the near future because I think the Treasury document was updated on the 2nd, perhaps, so pretty recently. My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, from our previous meeting with council, the committee of the whole, we stated that we would use it to ensure that our employees were safe and received the items they needed, which we've been doing: plexiglass, hand sanitizer, sanitation systems, those items. And then if we could use additional funds towards payroll, we would do that. And if not, then the funds would go back to the county and subsequently state, so on and so forth. It was my understanding that we were not interested in using them to do upgrades that were not kind of previously seen as a benefit. Again, my opinion was that the money it's taxpayer dollars, whether collected and used locally or not, and should be going back to communities that truly need it. And at this point, I would say we're in pretty good shape. We've spent over, I want to say, around $250,000 on making sure our employees are safe. And then the city of Findlay, with this amount, the first payment that we received, and the anticipated third amount, which should be approved by the House of Representatives either this week or next week, would give us an additional amount over $1 million. So I think our total would be around $2.2 million locally. So if we're able to use those, great. If not, then they would go back to the county.
With this amount, though, didn't we use the initial tranche? The initial tranche wasn't at 250.
I think it was $557,000.
557.
Yeah, so we still have funds remaining from the first amount at this point. Again, we're waiting for that clarification from OBM. And to my knowledge, all of the items that have been seen as necessary and appropriate for our employees to be safe have been purchased.
So let me understand this then. So are you saying that if OBM comes back and we get everything else in line to use this for the salaries, that we would use the additional amount, or is this the maximum we're going to use?
No, we would use it if we get the statement back from OBM, but we would be able to use those funds. With the firefighter payroll, 40% of those is being dedicated to EMS calls, 40% of their payroll. We pay over $400,000 a month in firefighter payrolls. So if we're looking from March to the end of this year, we can more than easily use up the funds. In my opinion, we can do that now. We're hoping to get additional clarification from OBM so that there's no gray area.
Mr. Schindeldecker.
It makes sense to transfer this money as this ordinance 2020-110 proposes. What are the deadlines for spending this money? Do they vary from department to department, or line item to line item?
It's established by the state because they have to, there are there are guidelines that has to go back to the county, then the county has the opportunity to redistribute the received funds at an allocated amount back to the entities which use their first portion, or can say how they're going to use it. And then the deadline with the state keeps changing a little bit. I believe the most recent date was October 15th. They have talked about then the counties having to have it back to the state by November 20th. And then the state has to have it back to the federal government by pretty much like the 28th or 29th of December.
Is there any anticipated date when we will learn whether we can allocate this to the firefighters or not?
Any day now, we should hear from OBM. I know I reached out to it. The Ohio Mayor's Alliance executive director has a good relationship with OBM to ask him to kind of push on getting a response from them. What I had heard most recently was pretty much, why do you need additional clarification? The Treasury document's clear. But I said we want it in writing, so we hope to have that any day now. And the auditor can provide an update if he's been the one communicating with OBM.
Any other questions for the auditor or the mayor? I'm sorry, Mr. Stachek, all the questions have been answered. Thank you.
No, I would like to call
there
it
you go.
Jim.
Mr.
Give it-
Wilson.
He can talk anytime he wants to.
No questions?
But he's
I'd like to answer those questions directly. First off, under the current legislation, we have to encumber the money by October 15th. So we have a short deadline for the letter. However, the legislation possibly will push that off to November 20. The key word here is encumber. That was a change from the original. The original said you had to spend the money. That's a blessing, so that's good. Also, I attended a very important webinar today, put on with regard to this money specifically this afternoon. And in there, they are openly saying what my letter did say. They're saying the three bodies all disagree. Ultimately, I hope we're able to use the money, as the mayor's hoping as well. So this isn't a disagreement per se, it's an ability, what we're, with our governing body being the OBM. I do have a concern though. I think we do have a great opportunity here to modernize our facilities a little bit more. I had expressed that originally, but I'm concerned because my office is getting reports from employees and from the public that they're being told there's no money available. And I want to make sure that, and I'm sure the mayor would want to clarify that our community knows that we have over $500,000 available right now that can be used for COVID appropriate expenses. And those monies could be considered for everything from touchless faucets in your bathroom down here to air handling systems, all kinds of different things, which is wonderful. So, which was the reason Ginger and I wanted to offer to have a meeting with appropriations if they were interested in moving forward. Should we be blessed to be able to just lump sum the money based on justification through the fire department. It does not give the money to the fire department. It does not give it to them. All it does is it reimburses using that as our reason for being able to take the money. But it's been clear, we've got cities, very large cities, that have hired professional consultants to answer this question. This question is muddled as anything, and I appreciate the mayor's optimism. The mayor should be optimistic, and I don't want to be pessimistic. What I want to say is as soon as OBM says we can, I'm good to go. Hopefully they say we can. I sent that request to them about 2 weeks ago, Mr. Schinderdecker, and I hope that I get a response. But based on what I heard today, and with them saying that the federal government is openly arguing over this, I would be very surprised, because they're the body over Ohio. I would be very surprised if we get a ruling locally from OBM before the Fed settles the matter. So I don't want to see us miss an opportunity and have to send money back when we are getting questions and concerns, and I'm happy to talk to the mayor about that after the meeting tomorrow during business to make sure our folks understand there's money available over $500,000.
Mr. Wilson.
Mayor, has there been requests outside of what we've discussed?
Can you be a little more specific? For example, I can give one item here real quick. Are you talking about, so?
Have people in the community requested use of these funds?
Yes, so we are working with them to use, because again, there's a larger pot of money within the county and many of the townships are unable to. So you may have seen the article in the Courier last week where myself and Auditor Rauschenberg spoke with the commissioners, because there are a number of townships that are giving funds back because they don't have the ability to utilize the funds. So there is a good portion of funds that is still available, and rather than the city of Findlay kind of be the funneling entity and have a narrow scope of who we can impact, oh goodness, that could have been bad. Instead, we have recommended that the county being the one to sub-grant the funds to county-wide organizations such as the HHWP CAC, so the Community Action Commission, which will be able to, for what we've requested is $500,000 that would go to the Community Action Commission from that county-wide pot of money to support eviction prevention, utility offset, some of those housing issues that we are seeing and expecting over the next couple of months as people are no longer getting that additional unemployment amount and are still having issues getting back to their original income levels. What we don't want to happen is suddenly not be able to meet their bills, be evicted, and then you have a rehousing issue, which is much more costly than just helping people in the short term. So what we have recommended is that our housing organizations in town have already been working throughout the pandemic to organize and have a housing hotline for individuals. And then they are coordinating with the individuals that need help to make sure that all of our nonprofits are working together and not kind of throwing money multiple times at the problem. And so CAC is an organization that works frequently with the federal requirements, and so they have the ability to manage that paperwork and the audit trail. And then it would go through our different housing organizations to support those. So that's one example, as well as the Hancock County ESC that helps with the schools countywide. They are also have requested about $80,000 that would help provide nurses in some of our county schools that do not have them to be on call and manage some of the different protocols that are happening to be in place. So we are definitely having those conversations. Again, it's hard because of the audit process. We want to make sure that we have the appropriate documentation and management of any organizations that we would sub-grant funds to. And so I've been taking the approach that the county is the larger organization to be able to do that because they want to have the funds and we want it to be countywide rather than if the city of Findlay is ahead of the curve and then we can only help the city of Findlay folks.
So really, the answer to the question that the auditor posed of people requesting funds outside of the purview that we've discussed for what we're using inside the city, we would direct them to the county.
You can speak with the county or myself. I know I've had a number of folks reach out. The Community Foundation, United Way have also all been involved in those conversations. And again, it's kind of continued to loosen how we can use those funds. But certainly feel free to reach out to myself or Charity Rauschenberg or Commissioner Bechtel.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Hearing none. Rules have been suspended and the clerk has given a second and third reading. We have a motion and a second so all those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Haas?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Schindledecker?
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2020-111, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2020-112, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and our city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to execute the necessary grant application or applications and or agreements to receive grant funds from the Ohio Public Works Commission for the state and Markle Streets reconstruction project number 328-03300 and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell.
Because in Brian's letter, he requested this be suspended, and because of the tight deadlines and because this is simply a grant application process. For those reasons, I would move this council's statutory rules be suspended and this ordinance be given its second and third readings.
Second, Mr. Niemeyer. All those in favor of suspending the rules say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Haas?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Schindledecker?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give the ordinance a second and third reading.
Ordinance 2020-112, ordinance 2020-112.
Mr. Slough.
I would move for adoption of ordinance 2020-112.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of ordinance 2020-112, say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Haas.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Schindeldecker.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2020-113. An ordinance amending chapter 1100 et sec of the codified ordinances of the city of Findlay, Ohio, known as the zoning code, by rezoning the following described property referred to as 525 and 529 Davis Street rezone, which previously was zoned R2 single family low density to M2 multiple family high density. First reading for ordinance 2020-114, an ordinance vacating a certain portion of a certain alley hereinafter referred to as 811 Broad Avenue Vacation in the city of Findlay, Ohio.
Old business. New business. Mayor, would you like to give your financial summary report? I'm sorry, Mr. Green.
Yes, I would like to, at the pleasure of council, set up a committee of the whole meeting. Some of the dates that I have are September 29th or October the 1st, and this is to discuss ordinance 2020-092.
I'm unavailable.
What were the dates again?
29th or October the 1st.
29th is a Tuesday, the 1st is a
It's
Thursday.
a Thursday, yes.
And what time were you proposing?
I'm assuming 5:30.
Is there any conflicts on the 1st?
I can't do either dates if you want me there.
Does the 29th work for most of us? Okay, how about we set it up for the 29th at 5:30? I'm assuming that we'll probably have it here in this chamber if it's available. I'll check with that.
Well, the time is, and the date and time, the place will be determined based
Right.
on the crowd probably.
Okay.
And normally we would have a COW up in the.
Yeah, I didn't know with the COVID,
Not with all these
Right.
people.
you know,
All right. Okay, so the 29th at 5:30.
correct.
Is that September?
That is September 29th.
Yes, sir.
Other new business, Mr. Station.
Very quickly before the meeting, I passed out a preliminary budget schedule. The only night that works that week for myself and my staff for a pre-budget meeting is September 30th. We were hoping you'd be willing to do it at 5:30 p.m. if that works for you folks, and then the budget follows. Ultimately, our goal is to get you the budget in book form by December 1st for that meeting.
Jim, no chance you could do this on the 29th?
I cannot. I will be scrambling even to make the water and sewer, which is important because I'm hoping we can fund whatever is decided.
The
You know, the
30th.
question I've got for you, Randy.
The question for me, the 30th is definitely out. I will be out of the city. So I can't make the 30th.
So, I guess the question before council is, Auditor Stashak is proposing a September 30th at 5:30.
That works for me. Both dates work for me.
Jim, you need more on the calendar.
Okay, sounds like that's okay. Other new business, Mayor?
We'll try to be quick on a couple of items. First, the financial summary. Again, just wanted to provide that as a snapshot. As As you can see, our departments continue to do a fantastic job of managing their expenses. We are just slightly over our, excuse me, I was looking at the wrong one. Our 2020 budget, our revenues are coming in relatively strong. We're only about 5% off year to date, which is great. And our expenses overall, again, keeping them behind target. Our targeted year to date was 28 million, and we are holding steady at about 18 million. So again, our departments are really managing those budgets well. You can see a further breakdown, and then just a brief snapshot at the bottom, and then again, the detail where you can see what our target by department is. So if you have any questions.
Mr. Russell.
So do you look in the crystal ball and expect to be below the 2020 target on expenses?
I would expect that our departments are going to be very close to, if not below, that target. They do a great job of knowing over the last number of years we've given between 6 and 8% of our budgeted expenses back just through normal management. We said, hey, do that and be prepared to even cut back further, and they have done that. So I'm very proud with how they've been performing, and not making, there are some easy things that you can do right away by not hiring staff that you are planning to, but our budgets run pretty lean to start with, and so they definitely have made changes. And this, again, I want to point out, especially if somebody in the public is looking at this, this is just our operational expenses. This is not even the capital changes that we made. And I'm proud to say even, we go through and clean projects out, and a number of our projects come in, our capital projects come in under budget. I think this past week I approved transfers and refunds pretty much back to our capital account of over $200,000, so that's great.
Thank you.
Other questions on that?
Mr. Russell.
Yeah, I just said, I appreciate getting this. I appreciate getting this in advance so that I have a chance to look at it. Very easy to understand. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Alicia Mitchell does a great job of putting that together for us. Because this is going to be the last time before the census deadline actually is, and then we can all throw a party, socially distanced, to celebrate it. I was trying to pull up Hancock County. We're at 74%, which is 5% ahead of Ohio. I could not on my phone, I forgot to look it up ahead of time, look at where we are nationally, but I would say that we're continuing to do a good job. And again, this is just the self-response rate. So on top of that, we will get those canvassing that's being done. Group housing has yet to be reported, as those will not be counted until the close. So overall, I think our county has done a great job of completing the census. If you have not done so, please make sure to do that by the end of September. September 30th is the last date to complete the census online, over the phone, or in person at this point by a census taker who are lovely community members going door to door to make sure that our community has an accurate count. So please be kind to them. Zoning map, just wanted to share, as Councilman Russell mentioned, so we sent out over 7,000 zoning postcards to folks proposing new zoning for their parcels. And we had 85 individuals attend our Zoom meeting. I thought it went very well. I was very nervous on how it was going to go and just the overall flow, but Matt Credonier did a fantastic job, and we tag-teamed that, so it actually ended up being a lot of fun. We've had 250 phone calls to Hancock Regional Planning asking questions about it. They have been very positive phone calls overall. As we explained, zoning is something folks just don't quite understand. And then we have only had, at this point, 95 opt-outs. So I think that's great. People have until the end of this month to opt out, no charge. All they have to do is return the form that can be printed off of our website, or we have some printed off if they want to just come up and complete it in the office as well. And we already talked on CARES, so I believe that is it for me. Any other questions? All right, thank you. Good to see you all.
Ms. Mayor, any other new business? If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Russell, second by Mr. Slough. We are adjourned at, have you heard this in a second? 7:59. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Adjourned.
She doesn't. No, I believe it's for everybody.